Welcome to the Experimental Honesty podcast. I'm Brian Curtis. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Jordan Kugler. Jordan's a licensed clinical psychologist with advanced training and specialization, working with adults and adolescents who are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, borderline personality disorder, major depressive disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. Now, as you'll hear, Jordan and I completed much of our training together in clinical psychology. He's an amazing psychologist and also a wonderful human, and you'll have the pleasure of Jordan teaching you one of his favorite psychological skills during our conversation today. And you can learn more about Jordan and his work by visiting perspectiveomaha.com. Okay, let's talk to Jordan. All right, well, I am here with Dr. Jordan Kugler. So, Jordan, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, it's fun to be on again, man. I always enjoy our conversations, Brian, so I'm excited to talk today. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to see you. So let me know, too, you've recently moved. Where are you at right now?
Yeah, so I came back to the home roots. I'm sorry, we probably cleared my throat a little bit. I caught, one of my daughter's daycare colds this week, so fighting that a little bit. My family and I moved from Salt Lake City back to Nebraska. So both my wife and I are originally from here and had been in Salt Lake for 8 years, and now we're back in the homeland. So we're in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm going to be starting work with a new private practice here. Really excited to kind of get going with that. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, it's a bummer to have you leave here, but glad you're there in Omaha safely. So to start here, we I guess we could say that we train together. We know each other very, very well. But if we could start for people who don't know you, talking about your story, right? How you got into this area, psychology, psychotherapy, and why this is important for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my journey, I think, like a lot of people, included some, when I was probably in my teenage years, I experienced some early losses, right? Like some things that just kind of woke you up to like the reality of like, oh, there's like real psychological pain and suffering out in the world. And happened with family members, happened with friends of mine, some things that, just kind of like experienced these early losses that kind of woke me up to those realities. And so I remember, going into college, I was interested in those stories. I was interested in how people develop resilience. I was interested in how people overcome traumas, both at like the family and individual level. And I didn't really know if that was a career or not, right? I thought psychology was interesting. I had heard that like, you can actually study this, and that was a thing you could do in college, and that there were people that you could talk to that, could help you make sense of that and might actually help you grow. And so, while I was in college, I took psychology classes. I wasn't really loving it initially. And then I had, abnormal psychology, like my sophomore year of college. I had an incredible professor, Dr. Tim Nelson, who I believe is still at the University of Nebraska. I have to follow up with that. But he did an amazing job with this course that really walked through like all these, differences and conditions, how you treat them. And I just found it so interesting. He gave this lecture like that was basically like, if you're interested, or if you're taking this class and you're interested in going to graduate school in psychology, here's all the reasons you shouldn't do it. It's like absurdly hard. It's really competitive. It's long. You don't get paid anything. If you just want people to call you doctor, the only people that are going to call you a doctor are like messing with you, And honestly, like I got to the end of that, and he's like, if you're still interested in this, then you actually might want to go to graduate school for psychology. And I was. And so I started getting involved with research labs as an undergrad. I got involved with the child maltreatment lab. So I was initially like kind of a child person, which I don't know if you know that. I was child, kind of heading towards like a child psychology developmental track. Was working a lot with child maltreatment. We had some really cool projects going. And then I got involved with pediatric health psychology labs. I did an incredible study, worked on an incredible study for domestic violence and substance use. That was just like, I was like, whoa, like these are the kind of projects that people do in graduate school. Like it was this awesome researcher, and it was just really fun. And so then I actually did something different after. So I kind of got going with those, and then I actually went to Nepal for 2.5 months with an organization called Tiny Hands International. It was an organization I kind of got connected to through the child maltreatment lab, through some other folks that did a lot of work with street orphan children, parents, and people in Nepal who were really struggling. And so I went there, worked with parents on how to like interact with kids who have gone through a lot of trauma, especially like these street orphans that are coming to these large foster homes, and how do you like effectively parent 8-year-olds who've been through like pretty extreme trauma and have already lived homeless for a year, right? Like how do you parent that? And so we did some of that work, and that was when I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Like I want to go get a PhD. I want to take take ownership in kind of this direction. And so then I came back, continued my work with research labs, and I went to Utah. Applied to work in all child psychology labs except for like 2 places. I think it was University of Utah and then Utah State. And I was like, kind of like, what, like maybe I like am really interested in trauma, but not necessarily like child trauma, because it was starting to get kind of heavy. And I was like, I don't know if I really like this. And so I then, applied for a couple of folks. Rebecca Blay was my first research supervisor, and she was working at Utah State, and we got connected. She was doing incredible research on military veterans with PTSD. And so that's kind of how I got into graduate school while I was there. This is turning into a long-winded answer, as you probably expected. But
this is your story, Jordan. it can be as long as you want it to.
So while I was there, I got really interested in military veteran PTSD research, which naturally then, as you dive into the trauma research and what happens to our military veterans when they see combat, when they experience PTSD in the military, you naturally start to overlap with some of the suicide literature, right? Veterans are, somewhere in the like 18 to 25% more likely to die by suicide. Statistics I think I'm pulling from a deep recess of my like master's thesis at some point, but and so I started, doing a lot more research on suicidality. My master's thesis was on PTSD and suicide in military veterans. And then I wanted to explore that clinically. I trained at the Utah Center for Evidence-Based Treatment, where I met you, because they were doing really cool work with, populations who experience trauma, chronic suicide, things like that. We, learned about DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, that we're going to get into here in a little bit. And that was, that's kind of my story. I got rolling. I did, I did an intensive trauma program during our residency at the Salt Lake VA. Learned all about CPT, trauma, CPT, prolonged exposure, cognitive processing therapy, conjoint couples therapy for PTSD, and now I'm kind of doing a lot of like trauma-focused acceptance and commitment therapy work, which is really unique and cool. It's kind of a cool way to approach trauma. So that's been my story. Got into private practice after that. I've been in private practice ever since.
Nice. I love the story. And I didn't know that you were starting out with, I think we talked about that once, that you started out with child and then went to adult. But the development in that through line, especially, but with trauma, both childhood, adult, and then suicidality and all those modalities that you use, there's that kind of consistent through line there.
Definitely.
So during your training and your clinical practice, so I'm curious so you took the abnormal psych class, Dr. Nelson there, don't do it. And then when you did the clinical training, was there anything that really surprised you, right? During this whole long journey, something maybe you didn't expect or you didn't know, anything that was surprising on this long journey you had to get where you are today?
Clinically, what surprised me the most was that I really, really love and am interested in working with that like high risk, personality disorder kind of population, right? Like, I remember my first graduate school class where we started talking about dialectical behavior therapy and started talking about borderline personality disorder. And I remember just being like, there is like no way I would ever do this. Like, this is so much. How could you ever like behaviorally shape self-harm? Like, how could you not take that seriously every single time? Like, I remember being like, I don't know what that would feel like in the room. Like, it feels scary. I wouldn't want to be like, could I handle that like challenge? And then like, I think my first year practicum, it was, pretty early on. And I remember like going through an intake and just feel like I walked out and, we had that structure where like you do an intake, you walk into your supervisors and they're like, all right, what did you notice? And I was like, wow, I feel like I just like drank from a fire hose. Like, that was so much information. There was so much energy kind of in the room. Right.
Yeah.
And then I like started like laying out my like case conceptualization. I was really like the pace of that style of therapy. And I was like, I think this might be a personality disorder. And they were like, yeah, like, good job. Like, and I was like, I also like, they were like, are you okay? Like, we can transfer this. And I was like, I kind of like enjoyed that. And then, we like, started working on it. I started learning about DBT and I just like loved the approach of like, it's not, if you hear personality disorder and you think like rigid, broken, like can't, like unfixable, there's all that stigma attached to it. Yep. When you learn about this style of therapy, that's like, this is a skills deficit. These are things that happen when you don't have this core set of skills. And if you change that, then all these other incredible things change. And I just like love that. And so I kind of was surprised that was what I went to, or really gravitated towards.
We completely share that surprise. That was, in thinking about mine, that was one of them. I came to UCBT and wanted to do DBT because I'm like, well, I want to be trained to handle anything, like whatever comes in the room, whatever's in front of me. I want that experience and to know what to do, to have that confidence. But I did not think this would be what my career would be. And it just totally grabbed me. I think we bonded on when reading, well, like and this is, I guess for me, the second thing that surprised me was that not every treatment is evidence-based. Not every treatment actually has randomized control trials. I mean, you go to see an oncologist, what you're pretty much, there's differences in them, but you're going to be getting science-based treatments for cancer. In our field, it really surprised me how it can be like the Wild West. And so getting training, when we get to something like DBT, that this has a bunch of research behind it, and that confidence of, well, this can sound very scary, but we actually know what to do. And we're not just pulling things out of the air, but that super shocked me was, wow, there are different approaches and not even everything is based on, research and evidence. I don't know if you shared that surprise, but that was shocking. It's still shocking.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. Like there's a lot of different styles of therapy out there, and you really like, you don't realize how loosely people follow. People have typically trained, or I don't know, at least the norm for a long time was like you had like one style that you did. That was the only thing you did. And it's like, man, like research doesn't necessarily support like CBT for everything, right? Or, and like, it's like, it works for a lot of stuff, but like, man, it might not work for this presentation of like health related anxiety that kind of overlaps with OCD. It's like, that's not going to work. Right. I found that a lot in the trauma research where like, you could challenge thoughts, you could do all of this, stuff, but like sometimes you need a little bit more like of an acceptance style. And so it's been really cool to see both of us kind of like look at the research and see all these different things that have new and emerging research, different styles to it, and then go, oh, okay, that works for this group, like this specific area, or like this kind of type of person. And I think that's one of my favorite parts of being a psychologist, is being able to like lay out the menu and be like, here are the boxes that you kind of like, that you kind of like check some things in. Here's what the research says is going to work for those. What do you think? Like, what do you like about this style versus like, you and I both share this, like, I hate doing therapy without a compass heading. I don't like it. I don't like the supportive, just like kind of problem of the week stuff. I'm like, I want to know where you want to go, because I want you to fire me at some point, right? Like, I don't want to be your therapist for 10 years and just have you kind of come in and like talk about, the neighbors down the street. And granted, like, that's a part of our conversations. I want to know about your life, but is that the thing that's going to like enrich your life? And if it's not, then, like, let's figure out what does and try to work on that. And so,
Yeah, absolutely. We completely share that. Well, we've maybe alluded to it a little bit here, but so your favorite type of therapy, you laid out a lot. There's DBT, there's ACT, CPT, prolonged exposure, all that. In terms of, your favorite thing, if I forced you to pick one, which one would that be? Why do you love it so much? How you got into it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, so, if you're listening to this, podcast and you're not, you're not in the psychology field and you're hearing these acronyms, like, that's okay. Brian and I are both like, we kind of nerd out on this, like all these treatments and the acronyms that go with it. But I'll try to narrow it down. Like, I really love dialectical behavior therapy. Like, that's my true love in the therapy world, right? It's also kind of hard to pull off, like, in terms of the full model, right? Like, there's different ways you can use parts of that therapy that still have research behind them, right? But like the full model dialectical behavior therapy is what I really like doing. I really love acceptance and commitment therapy, especially like what I've been diving into with like the trauma focus, kind of trauma adapted acceptance and commitment therapy. That's been super cool. Russ Harris put out an awesome book on that. That's been like, really changed a lot of my trauma practice. But yeah, DBT, DBT is a therapy that has a ton of research behind it. It's, probably closer to like an intensive outpatient therapy where, you're doing multiple sessions a week. That's kind of usually what, like, when you distill it down, that's how I, like, really quick in a nutshell think about intensive outpatient. Like, you're doing more than 1 hour a week of individual therapy, right? So in dialectical behavior therapy, you're doing, 1 hour with your individual therapist or so. You're doing a group skills class where you're, typically separate group leaders. Sometimes it's your therapist, sometimes aren't, are leading like a 2-hour class on how to, put these skills to regulate your emotions, to pay attention to the present moment, to navigate relationships and tolerate stressful experiences without engaging in problem behavior. You're covering all those skills, right? So that happens each week. You're also doing phone coaching with your therapist. So when you're out living your life, you're able to reach out and say, hey, Jordan, like, I am really worried that my partner is in a car crash. My emotions are kind of overwhelming me. I'm at work. Like, what can I do? And I can, respond. There's some limits. I have some limits around how quick I can respond, but like, I'll respond, within an hour, 2 hours, probably the max for me is about 3 hours. But within that time frame, and say like, hey, here's this skill that we covered. Like, you remember talking about that? Do you want me to walk you through it? Here's how I would do it. And it's kind of like, personal fitness coach or something like that. Like, it's more coaching, right? It's not therapy on demand. It's coaching for how to solve this thing that's happening in your life, which supports you taking what you learned in skills group, getting it into your life. And then we, talk about it all in therapy. And then, one of the most valuable pieces of a DBT program is kind of invisible to the patient, right? And that's the consultation team. So that's a group of dedicated DBT therapists, people who've been trained or are learning DBT or working on applying DBT with DBT clients. And you meet every week and talk about what's going on, right? You solve problems together, you support one another. It's both, consultation, which is like ongoing learning, and it's therapy for the therapist. It's a place where, I've laughed, I've cried, I've been super vulnerable on DBT teams. I've been incredibly anxious. Like, it's a very raw, vulnerable team. And I just like love that, I mean, like, that's such a unique experience in psychology or like in academia to have a place that's like, people you're like seen on DBT team. And that's very much a part of the model, is to be authentic, genuine, to say, I don't feel like a good therapist. Like, I'm screwing up. I don't know what's going on. I can't get this person unstuck. I feel shitty about myself. My my 9-month-old is affecting this person sitting across from me because I can't sleep at night, and like places for people to catch you, offer solutions. And so that's my favorite style. That's what I love.
Yeah, it's one of, if not my tippy top, it probably is actually.
Yeah.
And so just so happens, this is not planned, but so with the DBT skill, it's just a skills workhorse, right, of a treatment. And so part of what I want this to be is to really kind of demystify some of these principles, some of these practices. We hear these acronyms, and for me, going into being a therapist, I'm like, is it the couch thing? Like, do they lay down? What do we do? It took me like from that, I had no idea. And so for somebody watching who doesn't know what DBT is, who might be completely new to therapy, it might surprise a lot of people to know, no, a lot of this stuff that's evidence-based, a lot of it is skills. Like we're learning stuff and we're applying them. So knowing that DBT is just so skills heavy, if I had to have you pick your favorite skill, right? And maybe even to, teach it so viewers, listeners can get a sense of this, what would that be from DBT?
Yeah, this is always an ongoing conversation. It's like, I love ice cream, and like I go through periods of time where I really love chocolate fudge brownie ice cream, and there's periods of time where I really like coffee ice cream, and then I really like, I definitely don't like a sorbet. Now I'm getting distracted by my own metaphor, but like, that's just to say I like a lot of these DBT skills. I use them in my personal life all the time. Yep. My wife and I use them even like kind of sarcastically to one another, where like, you'll appreciate this, Brian, as a DBT therapist yourself, like there's a skill here called like half smile and willing hands that both of us, I remember both of us learning about it and being like, there's no way this works, right?
Yeah.
And like, anyway, like my wife and I will like, in arguments or moments of tension, kind of like go like this and raise our hands up, and there's like that natural irreverence, and it's like so frustrating. It's like, man, I actually kind of think it did something there, but so that's just to say, like, I like a lot of these skills. I use them all the time in my life. I think the one that I've been, I've kind of added some things. DBT is a little bit like the Blob. It takes everything that's effective from other therapies and kind of like pulls it in, absorbs it, and turns it into a handout. And I think I have that style as a therapist too, where, as I've worked on some of these other therapies, I've found different ways to teach these skills. And so the skill that I'm going to teach here is called check the facts. Okay. This is a skill from our emotion regulation module, right? Which is a lot about like how to change your emotions. And so I'm sure, a lot of the people out there, maybe even psychologists, therapists themselves are like, man, you can't change emotions, right? Like what are you talking about? And so this is a skill for, I've kind of adapted some of this language, that this is a skill for like when you have an emotion that is inconvenient, uncomfortable, or that you're really struggling to like make room for. This is an awesome skill for that, and it can help you, kind of get reoriented to what's going on. So check the facts involves a lot of different things, and just to preamble for this. I really, whenever I teach this skill, I'm like, you have to write this out. At least like, especially if your emotions are kind of, if it's like an intense emotion that you're trying to change, I want you to write. Okay. And the reason is because, you're experiencing intense emotion. Emotions, activate like those threat centers in our brain, right? Your amygdala, your hippocampus, like all of that gets really active. And one of the simplest biohacks for turning down activity that is to activate another part of our brain that's designed to control it, right? So writing is a really simple way to activate your prefrontal cortex, the executive functioning, all the brake pedals that kind of like, push back on emotions and say, hold on, like let's maybe not like scream at the guy who just like cut me off in the bathroom at the restaurant, right? Like, let's push back a second and just like take a deep breath and maybe say like, okay, buddy. But like, we're going to not throw the plate or whatever. So writing just is a simple way to start this. So I want you to actually write this out. So Brian, like maybe let's like kind of do this one together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to give you like a little bit of a scenario, maybe one that you've experienced before, but I want you to kind of like tell me, put yourself in the scenario and we'll kind of like go through, check the facts together.
Great.
So think about like research advisor, supervisor, boss, whoever at one time had a position of authority over you, a valuative position of authority of you. And I want you to imagine like, maybe you kind of made a couple of mistakes on your last project, something like that. You haven't heard much from this person. And then Friday morning, you get an email, pretty short wording that just says, I need to speak with you at 4:00.
Right.
Okay. What do you think you're feeling?
Well, I know. So in that moment, my heart rate increased. I noticed I have tension. I have like a knot in kind of my neck right here by the scapula. Breathing got shallow, and immediately it was, even though this is hypothetical, it was like, oh shit, like what did I do? What's happening? So immediately it went to threat, danger, tension, fight or flight, sympathetic.
Totally. Yeah. So the first step in checking the facts is to figure out what you're feeling. And I want you to be specific, right? Brian just did an awesome job of like walking through the different components of what he's feeling. If I were going to challenge you to like put a label to that, like what's the specific emotion you think you're feeling, Brian?
I mean, so I would say there's definitely anxiety. It's about the future, but there was also fear. It felt immediate, but on reflection, this is anxiety.
Yeah, this is anxiety. What's going to happen? Future related, right? Threat. How intense do you think you feel? Like scale of like, 0 pina colada on a beach to 100, like I'm pulling my hair out, crying. I don't know, how I can tolerate this another moment. Where do you think the intensity is?
At the peak there for me, I'm on the other side. If I was still in grad school, it'd be different. I would say I got to about a 35 or a 40.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So it's uncomfortable. It's causing some distress, right? It's not super overwhelming, but it's probably bursting into your mind like the Kool-Aid man a little bit, right? Your physiology has changed and your behavior might start to change as well, right? So this is a great spot to use this skill. So the first step is you've got to know specifically what you're feeling, and I want you to write that out. If you're like me, I kind of experienced, at least, before becoming a therapist, doing all this DBT work, I experienced emotions like a fog. I could tell you if I was feeling good or bad, but I didn't really know if it was shame or guilt or anxiety or sadness or anger or contentedness or boredom or whatever those were. And so I think, in DBT, they do some great work. There's these 10 handouts, page 213 to 224, because I've taught skills groups for 5 years. But these handouts that, do a really good job of breaking down like, hey, here's like kind of like the 10 universal emotions. Here's synonyms for these, but like these are the, the kind of like umbrellas of the emotions. Here's different words that we describe them. Here's what it feels like. So if you're like that, like go flip through those, find the specific thing, like challenge yourself to be an emotion detective and put words to it. Is it disgust? Is it shame? Is it anxiety? Whatever it is. So in this case, it's anxiety, right? It's uncomfortable. The second step here is to ask what the prompting event is. And this is where you're going to start writing. I want you to, Brian, you're going to write out what is it that seemed to happen right before you started feeling this. And I want you to, like police report style, no adjectives, just write out what happened, right? Take it a timeline approach. And so you're going to write out, last week I submitted my expense reports, 2 days after the deadline and got no response. The next day, earlier this week, my boss like reprimanded me for not turning in my expense reports in front of the whole team, right? And then today, and then you might, throw another fact in there that like today I received an email that says I need to speak with you at 4:00, right? So, Brian, you know this, but like, what are some of the things that are not in that?
Yeah, what I didn't hear, and I was listening for it to see if you do it, which is so evaluations, opinions, evaluative judgments. This was good or bad, right or wrong. They should or shouldn't have said that. Just the facts. I tend to think about this. What is something you could prove in a court of law? Right. These are things that actually happened. If there was a video recorder or an audio recorder switched on, just the facts of what happened. That's what I heard you say. No assumptions, no guesswork.
Totally. So that's exactly right. Like you're really just trying to focus on, really court of law, police report style, like just lay out what happened so we get a picture of what's going on, right? There is a spot for bringing in your thoughts, right? But you want to really pay attention because a lot of times we treat our thoughts like facts, and that's not true, right? So I didn't put in there, I'm going to get fired today, right?
Yep.
Because it's not a fact. I haven't been fired yet. Don't know what speak with me means, but like my brain wants me to be like, dude, you're going to get fired. You're going to get fired. It's going to happen now, right? Put that down. Like we need to plan for this, right? So step back, notice what just happened, right? Now then in step 3, and this is where I'm going to really pull you in, Brian, is what are your interpretations about what just happened, right? So here's how I've been kind of teaching this is when you look at those facts and draw, on your piece of paper where you're writing this down, write out what your brain did with each of those facts, okay? What did you tell yourself about that? And then maybe like free form, what have you been telling yourself about this whole story, this whole narrative that's emerged, right? So Brian, like, what do you, if you can put yourself in that situation, what do you think you're telling yourself about some of those facts or about the whole thing,
Yeah, I mean, again, that first thing was, what did I do, right? There's been a gap. I didn't receive anything. Yeah. I don't think I did anything.
Yeah.
I'm in trouble. Am I going to get kicked out of the program? Yeah. Now I have to find a different program and vocation. Is this going to ruin my life? It was also, this is unfair. What is, do I need to prepare anything? And so these thoughts were coming up, interpretations about, well, obviously I did something wrong, right? It was short. She didn't elaborate. Yeah. Maybe that's out of character. Yeah. And so I'm interpreting this as I did something and it's truly bad. And this can have catastrophic consequences for my life and the life of my whole family.
Yeah. If I did something wrong, like I will be punished, right?
Absolutely.
Things like that. And so you've got all these different interpretations that are kind of coming from this. Looking at those, are those skewing more positive or more negative?
Almost completely negative. I don't think I experienced anything that I would consider positive.
Yeah, and look, man, like we pay attention to the negative, like so much more than the positive, right? We're hardwired to do that. It's evolutionarily adaptive to like pay attention to the like imaginary threat and be prepared for it, rather than like assume everything is going to go fine and then like a bear wanders into your cave, right? Like that's not.
Yep.
So we're hardwired. It's a predisposition. We're going to pay attention to the negative. Now here's the challenge with this third step here is we notice those interpretations. And if you really see that you've really polarized to that negative side, I want you to try to consider other interpretations. And this is a brainstorming exercise. Throw shit out there that is a positive interpretation based on those facts. You don't have to believe it. I don't care if you believe it. But you have to acknowledge that's at least as possible as your other interpretation, because like those are just like, things in the wind, right? Like it's not a fact. Yeah. It hasn't happened yet. So Brian, if you were going to throw out like a positive interpretation on this, what would it be? What are some examples there?
I mean, so she wants to meet with me, right? She was too busy because she was so happy. It was super quick because she was going out to celebrate. And this is going to be a really awesome meeting, right? Yep. It could be she got some new news, right? She wants to share it with me. She was overjoyed. And that's what this is about. She needs to talk to me first thing.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. Needs to talk
my brain is on fire because my mind does not believe that at all, but that would be something.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happens. It's like the cognitive dissonance. That's like your emotions are screaming at you, like, don't let me go. No, like, don't think about that other thing. That's not what it is, right? It's the catastrophe. You're going to get fired, right? But this is the point where we start to turn our mind, get a little bit more flexible, right? We're going to consider like, hey, maybe she's meeting with me to be like, about something completely unrelated. Like I'm going to be out of the office for 2 weeks, right? Yeah. My birthday was on Monday. Maybe she's planning a surprise party for me. I know that's silly and no one's going to believe it, but you got to throw it out there. Like, maybe I'm getting promoted. Maybe she's quitting. Maybe she's announcing that she's madly in love with me. Like, I don't know. Throw it out there. I used to, a former colleague of ours, Colin, when we would, Colin Adamo, when we would teach this skill, he would always say, like, one of your interpretations has to involve, like, a romantic comedy, someone fell, and then I fell madly in love with someone, right? And I love that because it's like, force your mind to consider other alternatives. You don't have to believe them, but in doing that, the threat seems less real, right? It feels less urgent, less in front of you. So you start looking at these other interpretations, and then the next couple steps are going to be similarly structured here. Ask yourself, am I assuming a threat, right? So the next thing that you're going to write out is like, okay, what, like, seems like a lot of this, all of these interpretations are, involving like, punishment, right? So what am I trying to protect yourself from? Like, what do you think the threat is here, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is about my career.
Mm-hmm.
This is about my well-being. And that's what the threat is. Everything I've worked for, this one email, it's exploded, it's over.
Yeah. Yeah. So the threat, like big threat, right? Something that you really value, my career, this thing I've worked so hard for, it's going to be up in smoke, right? So then you got to write that down, like name it, right? Put the, turn the flashlight on and look under the bed, right? Let's see if we can find the boogeyman. So the threat is my career is going to be over on Friday at 4 because I'm going to, get fired or get let go. So the next step is to then ask yourself and be like, is this going to happen? Like, what's the probability that, like, without, let's assume you've had no prior warning. Let's assume, your track record's been good. You haven't been like, I don't know, drunk at the office or like showing up late every day. Like, you've made some mistakes, but like you haven't, done anything seriously wrong that would, warrant that. Ask yourself, like, how likely is it that I'm going to get fired, right? What do you think that probability is?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, way less than 5%.
Yeah.
Right? I would say very minuscule. If I'm in trouble, might be something I didn't intend, a misunderstanding, and I just don't have those facts yet. But yeah, extremely unlikely when I think about it rationally.
Yeah. So when you really like engage that rational part, you're like, man, like they'd really be jumping the gun to like fire me if on based on this offense, right? Like that's really going to be it, right? So you start thinking about then other outcomes, like what's maybe more likely as a response to the threat. And this is where I'd say, like, you can be silly with this, or you can try to be more realistic. Maybe more realistic will actually be comforting. It's like, I might get yelled at, right? Like I might get put on a, discipline plan or like a personal accountability plan or something. But my career is not over. That's just going to be uncomfortable, right? Maybe it'll damage my relationship with this boss, like whatever, right? And so start to name those other outcomes. And then, the next step is to think about like the catastrophe, right? So let's, occasionally the scary thing does happen, right? So let's imagine like, all right, like this is like, I know it's less than 5%, but like if my lottery number is going to get called and I'm going to get fired today, what would I do, right? You wouldn't just poof out of existence, right? Like you wouldn't just like be gone and into the wind. So like, what would you do from walking out of that office to, the next couple days to cope with that? And so that's, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, initially, it would be shock, right? A lot of emotional upset, but I have my support system. I have Megan. I also have that master's degree in neuroscience. Maybe I do go back and do more research. I don't get my clinical work. Or maybe it's like, hey, I go to the directors of clinical training and we talk about, do I find a new supervisor, right? What are these other options? Do I consider, if it's a research thing, I'm going pure clinical, right? Or I'm going to a different program. That might tack on 4 more years, 6 more years to my life. But because this career means so much to me, unless it destroys me permanently, there are other steps I can do. And even though it's going to be very uncomfortable and annoying, I'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. So you name the catastrophe. It sounds like you're going to gather some information. You're going to be like, well, if I'm getting fired, is it because of my research? Like, and so you might actually think about like, I actually like don't really love this research or whatever. Or maybe I don't really like this boss. Like if I did get fired, I'd have a pretty clear reason to start looking for, a different research program or just focusing on clinical work, right? Like sometimes in, examples with patients, like sometimes it's like, well, I'd get a severance package. And so then I would maybe go like take a couple of classes and extend my career, or I'd like, what, I'm going to buy that like, I don't know, that like piece of art. I'm going to buy that new gaming system. And for like 4 days, I'm just going to be 13 in my basement and play Fortnite, like whatever. Right? And it's like, hey, like, that's not like, that's not getting eaten by a tiger. Like you're coping with it. You could do that. You could survive that. And so, when you go through that and you kind of imagine yourself coping with it, a lot of times, like, you kind of get to the end of this process, and now we're at the end of the skill, and I'd be saying, like, okay, Brian, I want you to, like, re-rate yourself. Like, remember all that anxiety, that like 35 to 45 and anxiety that you were feeling. How do you feel now as you kind of like walked through this and read this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm still noticing a bit of discomfort. Probably about a 5%. Though. My heart rate, physiologically, it's down. My muscles are not tense. And it doesn't seem like that's likely to happen. But if it was, I actually know the steps I would take.
Yeah. And so that's a great point that, like, look, the emotion's not going to go away, right? Like, it may not. Sometimes it does, but like it may not.
Mm-hmm.
And what did change, though, was the intensity and your confidence that you have options, right? It doesn't feel so rigid, like, physically right in front of you without other options. It's maybe held a little bit more loosely. You're able to work with it rather than against it. And so that's a skill that I really like. And I've taught that a lot of different ways, and found some success with that lately.
I love that. Well, thank you, Jordan, for walking us through that.
Of course.
With that particular skill, I mean, clinically, when you teach this to people, I'm just curious, do you have examples of, with the patients, clients you've been working with, do you have specific examples of how this has kind of impacted their own lives, either in therapy or outside?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of times, I'm sorry, my dog is joined the conversation under the desk here.
We're not going to get through a conversation without your dog.
Leo, he just likes to, he's my therapy dog, and he has overheard a lot of therapy and now a lot of podcasts. So can you go over here, buddy? Go to place. Go to your pillow. Good boy. Okay. I think, like, a lot of the ways that people use this, I mean, there's a lot of examples. I teach this, in a weekly skills group, and have been for, almost 5 years now. And then I work with a lot of individual patients. But, I think, like, especially when you find yourself, like, ruminating, I've had a lot of patients use this skill when they catch themselves just, like, running through that, like, this scenario over and over and over again. It's going to be this way. It's going to be bad. And you're on this, like, hamster wheel of, like, what's the most creative catastrophe that I could come up with, right? That's, like, kind of like what our brain's doing, right? And so I've had folks, like, they've used this, to help with, like, the Sunday scaries, right? At night, on that Sunday night when you're, like, about to go back to work, and you're like, it's going to be bad. It's going to be the worst week ever. I don't think I can handle it. This is the week. It's going to be too much, right? And we use that skill, right? I've had folks use this when they get, like, genuinely, like, really frustrating news about their performance, about, school, whether it's, like, school or at the office, or even health, right? People, like, I'm just thinking of, someone that, like, got that, like, call from their doctor that's like, hey, we need you to come back in for more testing, right?
Yeah.
Oof, heart's pounding. You're like, oh, so it's cancer, right? It's cancer.
Right.
I'm going to die. What's my dog going to do if I die, right? And that's what you're thinking of, right? For me, like, especially before I had my daughter, I used this skill a lot. Like, I used to have a lot, it sounds silly, but I had a lot of, like, fear related to my dog passing away, suddenly, or having a health condition that I didn't know about. And, I've told you this story of, like, I remember in graduate school, like, he got this rash in his stomach, and I couldn't get him into the vet for, like, 5 days. And I would, like, every night I was just like, it's getting worse, right? The rash is getting worse. And I'm on PetMD, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm, like, on PetMD, and I'm just like, there's, like, oh, well, certain types of skin cancer can, like, produce these rashes in the area where my dog has a rash. And, like, you can tell if it's cancer related by these little, like, skin nodes, right? And so I remember I look, and I'm like, oh my God, Leo has these skin nodes, and they're black, and there's no hair around them. And I was like, a wreck, Brian. And I remember going to the vet, and here's the self-deprecation here. I go to the vet, and I'm like, I'm there an hour early. I'm pacing with my dog. I'm already thinking about, like, how am I going to pay for chemo treatment for my dog while I'm a graduate student? And I, like, the vet comes in, and I just, like, look like manic, and I like, I'm like, so he's got this rash, and there's these skin nodes, and there's, like, one right here, one right here, and one right here. And she's like, okay, those are his nipples. And I was like, I forgot that ending to that story. And I was like, what? and I like go through, I'm like, this one, she's like, that's a nipple. And I was like, this one over here. She's like, that's a nipple. She's like, he's got a little bit of like a skin rash. You can give him a Benadryl, and like left the office. And I just like sat there like, oh my God. And I like, remember going to my supervisor at UCBT and telling her about that. And she's like, check the facts, probably would have been useful there. And I was like, there it is. Like, apply that to your life, use that in your life. So yes. That's one of my favorite ones. I know it's not a patient one, but I'm a patient for all of us. So
I think, but for us too, and that's why I love DBT as well, is you don't just teach these things, you practice them, right? And this skill in particular, there's so many others, but when I find, and this about me, I have that tendency for rumination, for worry, for perfectionism. So combining that with the mindfulness skills, when I notice the hamster wheel starting to turn, when it's just over and over, taking a step back, noticing that, checking the facts. It can be the difference between an hour of feeling like you're, crazy making, you're pacing versus it might be the case. If it is, what do I do? So it can be life-changing for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you and I could talk for hours and hours about all this stuff. There's much more to say. For viewers, listeners who they're interested in, let's say, either DBT, trauma, suicidality, I will just tell people your expertise. I have a front row seat to watching you get training, and it's truly an honor to have you be a friend and a colleague here. But for people who might be interested and they have more questions, they want to reach out, how can people learn more about you, your work, and how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so right now probably the best way to find me, you can check out our the website of the new practice I'm at, which is perspectiveomaha.com. So if you're in Nebraska, even if you're in one of the side pack states, you're interested in working with me, you can kind of take a look at that. Or if you have questions for me, like a lot of my information is on there, about like my bio, some things I'm currently working on, stuff like that. The best email for me, you can shoot me an email, I'll respond, is jordan.kugler@perspectiveomaha.com. You can find me on Twitter. I think I'm jordan.kugler. Yeah, at jordan.kugler. I think that's it. Yeah. Those are probably the best ways. But like that, those websites have a lot of the things I'm working on. I'm also, I'm still working with the Utah Center for Evidence-Based Treatment. I'm just not taking new clients at this time there. And so, I have my bio. There's some incredible resources on that page. If you have questions or, things, I've got some some TED Talks, some books that I really like are listed there. A lot of our team has, accumulated a lot of different therapy resources for the passerby. And we're working on some cool stuff over there too. So I've got my foot in like kind of two worlds right now. But if you're interested in working with me specifically, have questions for me specifically, probably contact me through Perspective Omaha. If you're in Utah, look at me through Utah Center for Evidence-Based Treatment. Check out that webpage.
Perfect. Well, Jordan, as always, truly a pleasure, always an honor. I doubt very much this will be the last time we will do
I hope not, man. I hope I didn't scare anyone away. No, it was a blast, Brian. I love it as always. Great to talk to you.
All right, Jordan. Well, thanks so much. Great to talk to you.
Yep.